I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Hello, hello. What if Moses was under the influence when he saw the burning bush? Could he have gotten something wrong? All right, well, we're going to talk about it. But first, let me say hi to some people. Adric is first. He says it's on and says, let me find out Moses was on that good kush. Auntie is here with the peace sign that looks like rabbit ears. It is a peace sign. Hi, favorite Auntie. Auntie is betting on shrooms for Moses. Hmm. And let's talk to Alice in Wonderland when she's 10 feet tall. Auntie's going to have fun with this one. Auntie may be 10 feet tall right now. Vincent is here. He's got his coffee and his good stuff. Aloha from Hawaii. Spain Man is here. Hi, Spain Man. Adrian is here. He says, let's go. Oh, which is great. Vincent says the most high. Armando is here. Peace to you as well. That's funny. Hi, Cosmic Surfer TV. Adrian says, I got 5 on Moses's 1. Wait, wasn't he from Kush? I think he was from actually. Cosmic Surfer says Moses had some Zaza. And Auntie is getting there now. All right. So thank you all for being here. And for those of you watching from the clouds, please feel free to say hi. This is a very welcoming group. It is the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. They will be very welcoming as long as you're appropriate. And shout out to the replay gang. Okay, let's get into it. This is going to be a fun one. I think it'll be a fun one. All right. So the Hebrew word Asherah, we've talked about Asherah before, refers to the Canaanite mother goddess, often represented as a tree or a wooden pole in sacred groves. Acacia, also called Shittah or Shittim, shares some phonetic echoes and a whole bunch of semantic overlap with Asherah. Okay, so Asherah means happy upright grove. Acacia is an upright thorn tree, central in sacred building and purification. So both were symbols of life, fertility, and divine presence. So before Yahweh's exclusivity, Asherah was worshipped alongside of Yahweh in the Israelite shrines. This is confirmed by the Kindelet Ajrud inscriptions, where they have pictures of Yahweh and his Asherah. Acacia was the physical representation of Asherah in many cultic sites because it grows in the arid landscapes where Israelite and Canaanite rites took place, and it was seen as incorruptible and enduring. So that is a divine trait. Adrian says, say hi to Moses while you're in the clouds. He's there with you. That's a good one. But acacia is very important. So when I say that it is seen as divine, there is a reason. Okay, there are references to acacia throughout the Bible. So the Ark of the Covenant in Exodus 25:10, they shall make an ark of acacia wood. The holiest object of Israelite worship was crafted from acacia, signifying covenant. Okay. The tabernacle framework and altar of incense in Exodus 26:15 and then 30:1, all the core structures were built from acacia. The Shittim Grove at Shittim, Numbers 25:1. Remember, acacia, shittah, and shittim are all the same thing. Okay. The Israelites camp in acacia groves before entering Canaan, where they fall into sexual idolatry because Asherah worship was still active. Numbers 25:1. And then another word for acacia that scholars do not put together, but I'm going to put it together for you here today, is hyssop. So if you've heard of hyssop in the Bible, this is also acacia. So hyssop is used in purification. Exodus 12:22, Leviticus 14:4, Numbers 19:6. So bundles of hyssop which are young acacia shoots, are used in blood and water rituals, right? They are flexible, brushy, and sacred. Scholars don't know what hyssop is. The only plant that's named hyssop is in Europe. Hyssop was a name for a bundle of young saplings or shoots. In Psalms 51 and 7, purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. Moral purification is linked to the plant of the covenant. This is why they used hyssop, the young acacia shoots, for their purification rituals. Leviticus 14:4 and 6, 49 to 52, also used in purification rituals for lepers and to clean homes. John 19 and 29, a sponge with sour wine was lifted to Jesus on the stalk of a hyssop. What stalk could have done that? Acacia. So acacia was very important in ancient Yahweh worship, in Hebrew rituals, and Asherah veneration. It's very, very important to have this understanding that acacia was used in all of these rituals in its varying forms. It was consistently used, okay? It was around. A lot of it was around. Adrix says we're going to make a Kush tincture. Okay. However, it wasn't just the Israelites, it wasn't just the Hebrews who believed in the healing and divine nature of acacia, because the Egyptians, in their cosmology, the acacia tree was the central role. It was the tree of life, symbolizing rebirth, immortality, and divine protection. Okay. The god Osiris, who is the lord of the afterlife, was sometimes linked to the acacia, which represented renewal after death, resurrection. Okay. Ra, the sun god, was also connected to it as a source of light and creation. Its evergreen resilience, very resilient, echoing the daily rebirth of the sun. According to certain Heliopolitan traditions, Helios, think about that, the Benben, the first mound of creation that emerged from the primeval waters of Nun, was said to rise beneath an acacia tree. This gave the tree a role as a cosmic axis linking the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. The acacia lives for a very long time. It has thorns, it has fragrant blooms, and that reinforced its role as a protector and a sustainer of divine order, also called Ma'at, another divine feminine or mother goddess. Acacia wood was highly valued for its durability. This is why the Ark of the Covenant was made out of it. It is very resistant to decay. It won't break down, making it a fitting material for sacred and funerary purposes. Coffins, shrines, temple furnishings were almost exclusively crafted from acacia, symbolizing incorruptibility and the hope that the soul would remain intact in the afterlife. We still find this furniture today, and it is thousands of years old. Okay. Texts from the Pyramid texts and the Book of the Dead reference the acacia as a safe vessel for the deceased, both physically as coffin wood, right? And spiritually as the tree sheltering the soul. Acacia was very important in ancient times. In some traditions, the sacred sycamore and acacia groves were thought to provide shade and nourishment to the blessed dead, to the ancestors, often depicted as emerging from a tree to drink water offered by a goddess. Okay. The acacia tree is not just that. There's so much more about the acacia, and there's a good reason we're talking about it. Okay. The acacia tree produced gum resin, which is fragrant, it's amber-like, and it was used in the sacred perfumes and in ritual fumigations. In temple rites, the smoke was believed to carry prayers to the gods
and to purify both worshiper and the space that you're in. In the purification rites, priests would burn acacia resin during initiations and before handling divine images. So it would clean them as well. It was all about spiritual cleanliness and connection to the divine, whether it was your sacred ancestors or to the gods or to God, right? They used it in embalming and mummification. So, resin from acacia was included in embalming mixtures to preserve the body and to guard against spiritual corruption, mirroring its reputation for resisting decay. Acacia resin was one component of kyphi, Kyphi, a famous Egyptian incense blend used both ritually and medicinally. So we're going to start getting into it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so in Nubia, now we're going to talk about Kush. In Nubia, which is ancient Kush, acacia groves were sacred sites where offerings to the gods were made. Kushite rulers, who also ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty, carried acacia symbolism into the temple art, into the royal regalia, tying their kingship to divine life giving power. Nubian cosmology recognized acacia as a boundary tree, marking the threshold between the living and the ancestors. Among certain Sahelian and West African traditions, acacia trees are still revered as gathering points for spiritual councils and places where the ancestors' spirits dwell. You guys saw this on The Lion King. You saw the acacia tree. And also in Wakanda, when they go to the ancestors, you will see the acacia tree. In some Fulani and Mande oral traditions, the acacia is seen as the first tree. It was the first tree created. It is the template and the archetype, its roots reaching into the realm of the ancestors. Not just them. In Sufi cosmology, with roots in Africa and the Middle East, the acacia appears as a symbol of the soul's journey, rooted in divine truth, blossoming in spiritual wisdom, and crowned with the light of God. Some Sufi orders in Sudan and Egypt even hold zikir, which is a remembrance. So, a zikir ceremony under the sacred acacia tree. Across the African continent, the acacia is a visual emblem of endurance, community, eternal life, and it's able to thrive in harsh conditions, no matter what those conditions are, much like African civilizations have endured through centuries of challenge. Modern African movements reclaim the acacia as a symbol of ancestral resilience and unity. And remember, it doesn't decay. So acacia was a big, big deal in the ancient world. But does it have a mystical dimension? Let's talk about it. So, several acacia species native to Egypt, Nubia, and the Sinai Peninsula, including Acacia nilotica, Acacia sayal, and Acacia tortilis, are known to contain what? DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, in their root bark, in their regular bark, and in the resin. Okay, so global acacia chemistry, right? Other species outside of Africa, Acacia confusa in Asia, Acacia madeni in Australia, also contain high levels of DMT, suggesting that this biochemical trait is widespread across the genus. Let's see what people are saying. Adrian says, I'm glad my mama didn't have an acacia tree. She'd have gotten a switch from it instead. Because it doesn't decay. The leaves of the tree were for healing of the nations, Vincent says. Yeah, that's probably true. JB Designs, thank you for being here. Acacia tortulis, is that where we get torta from? Maybe. That's a turtle. So maybe. That's interesting. Okay, so high levels of DMT across acacia, okay? They have something called beta carbolines, not beta carotene, beta carbolines, such as harmon and harmaline, which they're occasionally present in trace amounts in acacia species or in plants commonly used alongside them. What those compounds are is something called an MAOI, a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Now, the interesting thing about that is sold as a antidepressant, the MAOIs, okay, before we got to things like Prozac, okay? Making orally ingested DMT purely psychoactive, similar to the pharmacological principle behind ayahuasca. It works the same way, and ayahuasca is found in South America. So, ancient Egyptian temple rituals often involved fumigating. That means hotboxing, okay? Fumigating with a triad of sacred resins, which was acacia gum, right? Frankincense, and myrrh. Those were the three things that were used for fumigation. That's just a purity ritual where you're hotboxing, right? Burning these substances releases a dense aromatic smoke containing volatile terpenes, phenols, and trace alkaloids. In enclosed temple spaces, especially during fasting or sensory isolation, the smoke produces psychoactive effects. This is why it is the key to the other side. It is the place that connects us to the divine. It is how we get to our ancestors. This is why. It produces heightened sensory perception, subtle shifts in visual and auditory processing, and altered time perception. Time perception is a big one. Why? Because that's what marijuana does. These effects, while gentler than modern psychedelic doses, so the shrooms, could potentiate trance states. It would put people in trances where they would hallucinate and connect to the divine and to the ancestors. And it especially worked in initiates already primed through the chanting, the drumming, the breath work. It is very, very similar to cannabis. So both have these same effects, all right? Low level exposure to acacia-based ritual smoke and mild cannabis intoxication produces overlapping effects on perception. Even though their active compounds are different, they work the same. In cannabis, the main psychoactive compound, which is THC, 9-THC, interacts with CB1 receptors in the brain, modulating your neurotransmitters involved in sensory processing, time perception, and mood. Acacia's incense smoke contains DMT alkaloids, right? And aromatic terpenes in some of them, okay? The terpenes themselves have neuroactive effects even. They're nootropic, right? It can calm you or it can stimulate you. Depends on which strain you get, much like cannabis. Just caught that bamboo paper hotboxing in a car. And the apothecary, yeah. DMT infused whoopers. Good grief. So, in both cases, the result at even low doses is heightened sensitivity to light, color, and texture, subtle auditory enhancement, like through music sounds sounding more richer or more spacious, and a shift in the subjective sense of time. Things feel slower and more fluid. But the higher you increase those doses, the more psychoactive they get. So, the altered atmosphere created by acacia and ayahuasca was not merely for, fragrance and to set the mood, right? It was believed to open the channel, right, between the human and the divine realms. So in Egyptian cosmology, smoke rising to the ceiling symbolized the Ba, the soul ascending towards the gods, an out of body experience. The Ba leaves the body and it floats with the smoke. When infused with acacia psychoactive properties, it had a multi layered meaning, right? So, priestly training involved sensory deprivation, ritual fasting, and long chanting cycles, all of which would amplify effects of any chemicals that you're going to put in your body, especially ones that are psychoactive. So, this aligns with similar practices in lots of other cultures. Okay. In the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, they use a psychoactive kykeon brew. In Siberian shamanism, they inhaled plant smoke to induce visions. And then the Amazonian ayahuasca ceremonies, they mixed DMT and MAOI, the same things that's in Acacia, right? For these guided vision. Okay. The highly symbolic seeing of the gods in Egyptian initiation rites were partially facilitated by acacia resin. So, what does that mean for Moses? So, Moses had fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating a Hebrew slave. Okay, that's the story. That's in Exodus 2:11-15. Okay, Moses flees to Midian and tends flocks in the wilderness near Sinai. So I told you where all of these acacias are. Okay. Now, Sinai is full of acacia groves. He is there for like 40 years working for his father in law, Jethro. Okay. So he approaches Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. It's the same mount where there is an Asherah site. A sacred acacia grows there. That is where fertility rites took place. Moses notices a bush that is on fire but is not being consumed. This is his story. The bush appears to burn but is not consumed because. Here's where it gets important and science steps in. Resin pockets ignite in desert heat due to flammable vapors. This is not just the acacia tree. This happens in the desert with highly resinous plants. The vapors can spontaneously sort of catch on fire and have the vapors on fire. There is flame from the vapors, okay? So resin pockets ignite in desert heat due to flammable vapors. It is a proven event that takes place with several bushes in the Middle East. And so it burns without a quick and it sustains the flames because it's the vapors that are on fire from the heat. The text emphasizes the paradox. Flames blaze in it, yet the branches and leaves remain intact. It's because the vapors were on fire. Okay. This draws Moses closer. Okay. He says to himself, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why the bush does not burn up. That's in Exodus 3:3. Okay. Moses enters an altered state from the heat, the fasting. He was fasting all the time and inhaling this aromatic smoke because all of this acacia bushes resin and vapors were on fire. And here Moses said, let me go get a closer look. Let me put my head in it. Okay. In his trance-like condition, he hears the call of Yahweh, which he said he was in a trance after approaching the bush. Okay. God calls his name twice from the midst of the bush because he's so high, he's not paying attention. Moses. Moses. Right? Now, what the Bible scholars will tell you is that this is a device signaling their intimate relationship and the urgency of the message. He wasn't paying attention. Moses replies, here I am. Here I am, bro. God tells him, don't come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is a holy ground. Now remember, he was on an ancient Asherah site. Okay, makes sense. This is a long-standing sacred grove tradition. This is what happened in all of the sacred groves. You had to take your sandals off lest you trample these little shoots and trees that were trying to grow, right? But Moses says, oh, it's because Yahweh's there. Okay. But this is the moment that that Moses kills off Asherah permanently. Because even though he's in an ancient Asherah site and an acacia bush is burning and making him high and hear God's speak to him, this is where he goes with it. He asks the bush, who shall I say sent me? Said another way, Moses was always effed up. Bismarck, you said it best. Vapors. Okay, well, he didn't say it like that. But he said, who shall I say sent me? God answers, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I am who I am, which is Eya, Asher, Eya. Also rendered I am, or I will be what I will be. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, remember Asher in Hebrew has multiple meanings. So if Eya means I am, but Asher could mean a lot of stuff. Asher can mean about or with. So I am about I am with I am. Those can have very different meanings, right? Other than I am who I am. But if you put it in a different time context, I will be what I will be, or I was what I was. However, remember that in ancient Anunnaki texts, what did we call Enki? What did the people call Enki? They called him Ea. So it could have said, Ea, who is Ea? Who shall I sent me? How shall I say sent me? Enki, who is Enki? Could have been, but we don't know, right? But this Ea Asher Ea becomes Yahweh, the YHWH, right? Which they pronounced Yahweh, and the covenant name of God in Hebrew traditions moving forward. Now, remember when we talked about Noah and Noah drunkenly saying stuff? Now we've got Moses, who's he could be high, right? The bush, once Asherah's symbol, now becomes the symbol of Yahweh. The fertility goddess is fully syncretized and absorbed by Yahweh. Now the bush is Yahweh's. And we're not sure what he saw, right? What he says he saw, or what he heard, or says he heard. And even if he was where he says he was, we don't know any of that. But what we do know is that bushes burn in the desert without a quick. And they burn and don't burn up because the vapors catch on fire from the heat. It happens a lot. Okay. So, in summary, all right, Moses entered an Asherah grove by Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, right? There are thorny acacia bushes everywhere, right? One or two of them, the vapors are burning. He inhales its smoke as the resin pockets glowed like an eternal fire. And in that altered state, he heard a voice declaring that the mother tree of life is actually Yahweh, thus beginning the death of Asherah and the birth of Yahweh divorcing himself from Asherah to become the patriarchal religion we know today. Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb. I just listened to that. Adrixon's got the vapors. Oh my, I got the vapors. All right. Are you guys ready for it? Aw. Thank you, Adric. That is so sweet. You are so sweet. Thank you for the congratulations and being fully monetized. It's awesome. And you're showing that the super chats work. So if you want to pay any tuition costs or my research fees, I literally spent 9 hours doing research yesterday. But if you want to contribute, it would be very appreciated. And thank you so much, Adric. I appreciate you so much. So hopefully you guys are ready to get weird. It's not time for the pup cameo yet.
Ten for time for winners, time for winners, time for this in the Lord. 10 for time for winners, time for winners, time for CIA and Kelpro, CIA Pro. Secrets not supposed to know. Tartaria, Vanishland, MK Ultra, minds and trends. Iran Contra, Secret Dance. 10 for hat. Time for winners, time for this in the door. 10 for hat. Tapes that roll black Indians, they don't extol. Hidden history in this sky. Group is 10 from your eyes. Whisper child fact alone. They can't gaslight no more. It's time for this. Time for this. Time for wins, time for this, time for this, time making a cat. Tin for your tin for tapes that roll. Like pumpkin in the next door. History in disguise. Truth is hidden from your eyes. Whisper, travel, fact or lore. They can't gaslight no more. 10 for pass in a cab. For wins, time for this, time for this, time making a cab. Yeah.
All right. That's always fun to watch. Adric, you're saying dancing teddy bears because that's Wyatt from when I chose the bear. All right. So it's time to get weird. As the song said, time for weirdness. All right. So Oh, yeah, Puff the Magic Dragon. That could be a whole show, Vincent. So plants like acacia, myrrh, frankincense, and others were used in spiritual, medicinal, and ritual practices, like I said, right? So here's some examples, not just acacia, which is Ashura's tree of life, right? Acacia was always used for oral health, your teeth, right? And gums, purification, and spiritual defense. Myrrh was used for anointing, but it was also anti inflammatory, womb healing, and they used it also in embalming because of a smooth soul transition, right? Then we have frankincense, which is a mood elevator. If you can get some frankincense essential oil, it's a nootropic. It's it's an amazing thing. Frankincense also is a pineal gland stimulator. So if you feel like you have a calcified pineal gland and you want to stimulate it, frankincense essential oil, right? Also used in purification. And yes, the teddy bear was wearing chucks. But also cedar, sage, and mugwort were also used as fumigants, and they have vision-inducing properties as well. These plants weren't spiritual because people were superstitious. They were spiritual because they actually worked. And to the ancients, up until very recently, there was no differentiation between spiritual and scientific. It was the same thing. Mina says, I just ordered this tree off of Amazon. I'm going to need help planting. I love it. And I'm very happy that you did. I ordered some acacia gum. And I have it, and I'm figuring out what I want to do with it. But I also ordered something else with acacia in it, and when we get to that point, I'm going to tell you. So, what if I told you that most of these sacred substances and more were replaced intentionally with synthetic doppelgangers, right? That dull the body, trap the mind, and lock out the divine. So, let's use as a case study fluoride. Water fluoridation was touted as a 20th century miracle for oral health. But the fluoride used came not from spring water. It wasn't natural fluoride from spring water, but it was from industrial waste produced by chemical and aluminum factories. This is proven. You can look it up. This public health measure was also championed by the toxic industries seeking disposal routes, and they could just mask it as a cure. All right, so fluoride added to water was a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry as well. Storages of fluorosilicic acid. So it's not fluoride from natural springs. It is fluorosilicic acid was then pumped into the water systems as a great way to dispose of waste. But they said it was part of public health policy because fluoride is good for your teeth. So there was corporate involvement. The ALCOA, which is an aluminum giant, participated directly in pushing fluoride into municipal water systems, converting toxic effluents, love that word, by the way, into a prescription for all via the public water system. During the Cold War, conspiracy theorists like the John Birch Society branded fluoridation as a communist or a Nazi plot to dumb down populations. Though it was largely ridiculed, the thought persists. And there's a reason why the thought persists. Traditional remedies like acacia, frankincense, and myrrh, which had for hundreds of thousands, if not a million years, were the universal tools of healing, were systematically excised from the mainstream use in favor of patentable synthetic analogs. And if you can patent it, you can sell it. If you can steal it, then you can sell it back to people. God forbid we have free natural healing. So this not only shifts treatment, but it erodes spiritual literacy. So a move from beneficial to religious and governmental based centralized control. And then all these companies were involved because they could get rid of their toxic waste into our water system and tell us it's good for us. Okay. The Buddhist tree of life symbolism tied to acacia gave way to fluoride toothpaste marketing. So not only were we getting it, and in some places still get it, in the drinking water, so we're drinking it, which does nothing for oral health. Tons of research on that. Drinking fluoridated water does nothing for your teeth, right? So now we have fluoride toothpaste marketing. Myrrh just became this sort of smoky perfume core rather than a sacred anointing. What was once transformative ritual became passive consumer habit, unfortunately. Now, acacia toothpaste is what I've ordered, and I actually really love it. I got it off of Amazon. It is great. All right. So hundreds of lawsuits against fluoridation were just dismissed in court. Hundreds. Courts upheld fluoride's role as not medication, but it's just public health policy. Even though all the scientific studies said it's terrible for you, right? While scientific consensus supports fluoride safety in general, the natural fluoride in natural spring water, there remains a cultured undercurrent of public distrust and ethical objection to what is happening. Because the fluoride they're pumping into our water and into our toothpaste is also way too much fluoride. And it's not the right kind, right? Non-Western and European countries have outright rejected, or heavily limited fluoride, showing that global leaders protecting their citizens, where our country feeds us toxic waste into our water system. And he says, just another mechanism to disconnect us from our higher selves, pineal gland, and source. Yes, because what does fluoride do? Calcifies the pineal gland. So we went from acacia, which helps our pineal gland, to fluoride and overproduction of the wrong kind of fluoride, which calcifies the pineal gland. But this is not the only time. That's just a case study. And it's not the only thing where they do this. So let's talk about food and the additives they put in food. So red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, and blue 1 are heavily restricted or outright banned in the EU, the UK, and a bunch of other countries due to its links to hyperactivity and being diagnosed as ADHD, and it's carcinogenic. But they're common in US snacks, cereals, and drinks. The stuff that we give to kids. All right, brominated vegetable oil, called BVO, is banned in the EU, Japan, and India, but it's still legal in US beverages, okay, though Pepsi and Coca-Cola phased it out recently in many, but not all of their products, okay? Potassium bromate. It is used to strengthen dough in bread in the US. Remember, because we're not using acacia gum to do the same thing. But it's banned in Canada, the EU, and the UK because what? It causes cancer. Ractopamine is a feed additive for pigs and cattle to promote leanness, lots of, good muscle meat. It is banned in over 150 countries, including China and the EU, but it's legal in the US. Now, GMOs. I know you guys have heard about GMOs. It is restricted, or they are forced to label it in many countries, the EU, Russia, China, but is widely grown and does not have to be labeled in the US because GMOs are a very cheap way to make stuff you can put in your mouth and make your stomach feel full. I don't know why we would call it food. Okay, artificial trans fats from partially hydrogenated oils. They are completely banned in many and most countries. The FDA banned industrial trans fat in 2018, but a bunch of loopholes, because you know how companies are, allow certain amounts in certain foods, right? Growth hormones in meats. The EU bans beef from cattle that is given hormones like estradiol and trenbolone, right? But all of the hormones are legal in any US meat. All right. It's not just food, though, right? We have household products that we use. So, triclosan and triclocarban. Okay. These are antimicrobial chemicals banned in the EU in soaps and cosmetics due to hormone disruption risks. It messes with your hormones. So, I was just talking to you about the stuff that is antimicrobial. There are very natural things that are antimicrobial, antifungal, antibiotic, but they steal them and then sell them back to you, right? Now, this triclosan and triclocarban are still present in US consumer goods. Formaldehyde in cosmetics. Yes, formaldehyde. It is banned in hair straighteners and nail products in the EU and Japan, but it's still very much allowed in US products. And then parabens. Some parabens are banned in the EU cosmetics, but they put parabens in all of the US skincare items. Okay, not just household stuff. Asbestos. We know the dangers of asbestos, right? Asbestos is banned in over 60 countries, but it is still not fully banned in the US, and it can be found today in certain products. Then we have glyphosate, which is in Roundup. Like, we know that Roundup creates cancer quickly and deadly, right? It is banned in many countries because of that, but it's widely used in the US. Sprayed into the air where we can all breathe it, right? Atrazine. Atrazine is a pesticide banned in the EU due to what it does to the water, right? Because it contaminates water. It is heavily used in US corn farming. Atrazine. Okay. Then we have water fluoridization. We talked about that, right? But water fluoridation is banned in many European countries. You know how they get their fluoride? It's in salt, because it's the natural fluoride from springs. That's how they get their people fluoride, right? There's also technology. Microwave ovens were restricted in Russia because of health concerns, because they can cause cancer. Chlorinated chicken, right, is legal in the US and banned everywhere else, right? That's what makes it look white. And that's what, kills the salmonella on the surface, so that you buy it, because, we'll douse it in chlorine. Okay. And raw milk, right? Raw milk is still legal in the US, but it's banned in Canada, Scotland, and Australia because pasteurization, right? Now, we have this constant substitution that is happening, right? We have acacia, which is also called gum Arabic, hyssop, right? It's also called hyssop. And it was all about oral purification. That's what's best for your teeth. But instead, we get fluoride from toxic waste in our toothpaste and our water. It's a control mechanism, right? It leads to pineal gland calcification, which reduces intuition and lowers your cognitive resistance. This right here is why the thought persists that they continue to give United States citizens fluoride to make them weak and less resistant, because it gives you cognitive fog and reduces your intuition. Kentucky Fried Fluoride. So then we had myrrh, which is an anointing oil, great for wound healing, great for working in the womb and the cervix, right? But now myrrh is just part of perfume. And they give us synthetic oils and synthetic scents in our perfume and our mass market deodorants, right? We get from these synthetic perfumes and deodorants endocrine disruption. It's part of our hormones, right? So we get hormonal confusion, which leads to spiritual detachment. Frankincense, which was used for prayer through incense, right? Emotional elevation was good if you were depressed, feeling down, feeling anxious, and it would stimulate the pineal gland. Now we just get aerosol air fresheners and these chemical incense sticks, right? So those things lead to neurotoxins in our brains, mood suppression, so more and more depression, and damage to our spiritual breathing rhythms, which is what we used when we had frankincense. So all of these sacred oils like olive oil, spikenard, cedar, sandalwood, all of those got changed. Now we have petroleum-based cosmetic oils and lotions instead of those oils. This leads to more hormone disruption, right? Our skin is absorbing toxins. And then we have this very weakened energetic boundary in our bioelectromagnetic field. Then we had the combustible herbs, sage, mugwort, cedar, palo santo, right? Now, instead of cleaning the air with those, we get Lysol and Febreze and chemical disinfectants that we spray into the air and breathe. Okay. Now, this is sterilizing our places, right? This is chemical cleansing. There's no spiritual reset. We breathe it in and it causes us lots of damage. Now, the natural salts that we had, sea salt, mineral salt, right, was all used in temple rites. They are important for you. Salts are great for your thyroid, okay? But now we get bleached iodized table salt, right? We get mineral depletion. We get salt addiction because we're constantly craving salt, but the salt we're eating isn't it, right? We get disrupted cellular conductivity because we're not getting our electrolytes. The sacred fire smoke from copal, from resin smoke, and from burning gum from the trees, right? Now we get ventilation, right? We never want smoke. Oh God, you're going to catch everything on fire. So if we have to do anything with flames, it's in a candle with more of those chemical toxins in it, right? We don't get sacred fire in any of our modern spaces. It is all spiritually sterile. Now on to our pineal stimulating resins, acacia, ayahuasca, and some of those other ancient herbs, right? Now we get SSRI drugs, antidepressants, stimulants, ADHD meds, all kinds of stuff, right? So our neurotransmitters in our brains get hijacked and we get dependent on synthetic mood control. Instead of having the power in ourselves to be able to handle and address a lot of these things. Now, I'm going to be the first one to say sometimes medication is necessary. Sometimes utilizing those synthetic meds works really well for mental health and for health. But we go to those things way too fast. And Big Pharma makes a lot of money off of treating the side effects of us not being able to do things in the healthy way. There also used to be plant-based birth control, fertility medicine, right? Myrrh, blue cohosh, and mugwort, right? You could make a hormonal contraceptive out of that. You could also increase fertility with that, with this plant-based medicine, right? So now we have this reproductive disconnection. We have a profit model built on replacing body wisdom and knowing what we need to do. And abortion clinics everywhere, right? Industry is the only one that benefits, okay? Because we shifted from earth-based system to hierarchical, punitive, commodified systems. So replacement of natural medicine with patents so they could sell it to you, with synthetic pharmaceuticals so they could just make any in a lab anytime they want to. We have the rise of centralized systems of care, law, and worship. They regulate all of it to take away what? Our personal agency. They erase the divine operating system, us, and replaced it with one that only runs if you're dependent, disconnected, and digesting all of their stuff all the time. Actual mechanisms that reduce resistance and increase conformity. Let's talk about those. Fluoride reduces resistance and increases conformity. The BPA phthalates in synthetics, right? Fake fragrances, we talked about that, and processed foods, right? Processed foods get between your gut-brain barrier. That conversation your gut and brain is having to say what you need and how much you need of it creates total dysfunction. So we have lowered intuition and we get decision fatigue all the time. A sedated population doesn't revolt. It scrolls, it sleeps, it complies. Oh, Adrix says I'm growing ashwagandha. That's amazing. And Armando says the commodification of everything. Yeah, definitely. The author and the finisher, Vincent. Yep. So you are not powerless, right? You're drugged and disconnected from the plant-based code of nature. If we return to Akasha for oral health, gut health, and spiritual clarity, if we burn real frankincense and myrrh to clear our space and our pineal gland, if we use sacred oils, sacred salts, and herbs in our ritual acts of remembrance, then we can relearn what the ancients encoded into their healing. Because wisdom and healing is built directly into nature. Now, not only did we have tinfoil hat, we're going to have a bonus section. So give me one moment. All right, Adric, you know it's the firmicutes that are calling for the donuts, not your actual gut. All right, so acacia, right, has a long history of medicinal use in Africa, the Near East, or, North Africa, and Asia. Its healing properties were well known in ancient Egypt, Israel, and traditional medicine systems. So here's the detailed breakdown of acacia. Gum arabic, or Arabic, from Acacia Sayal and Acacia Senegal, okay, which is where I got my acacia gum from. It is rich in polysaccharides, soluble fiber, minerals. It's anti-inflammatory and soothing. It's great for your teeth and gums, right? Then we have tannins, which are found in the bark and in the pods. It's a natural astringent. It tightens tissues and reduces bleeding. It has flavonoids and phenolic compounds, which is antioxidant and antimicrobial. It has alkaloids, which are mildly psychoactive in the root bark. And then essential oils and resins, which are antiseptic, and they smell great. Adric still wants the donut. Okay. So the healing properties that are documented in ancient and modern use, right? So gum arabic is used for soothing throat irritation and cough. Egyptian papyri mention this. It's cough medicine. It's a demulcent, which protects the mucous membranes. And remember, we need that for gut health. It's good for treating diarrhea and dysentery, right? They make these decoctions out of bark and it reduces intestinal inflammation. It has a prebiotic effect, right? Modern science confirmed that acacia gum supports gut microbiota. And we just talked about that, right? How when the microbiome gets out of whack and the firmicutes take over, it hijacks our mind and makes us think we want to eat different things than what we actually want to eat. It's also used for wound care. So bark powder or paste applied to wounds worked as an antiseptic and a styptic, which means it stops bleeding, right? It was used in ritual purification of skin lesions, right? In the Bible. It's anti-inflammatory and analgesic. The decoction's used for arthritis, joint pain, and fever reduction. It contains natural tannins that reduce swelling and pain reliever. Smoke or resin inhalation in ancient rituals doubled as a fumigant, killing airborne pathogens. We don't need Lysol. Gum arabic or acacia gum syrups were used to ease bronchial irritation and coughing, right? Antimicrobial. Bark and resin inhibit bacterial growth. This is confirmed in modern phytochemistry studies. Egyptians used acacia extract for oral hygiene, that was in their toothpaste, and also for wound sterilization. Spain man's having eclairs. His firmicutes are talking too. Ancient Egyptian contraceptive recipe in Eber's, where Eber, the Hebrews, Eber, that's who Eber, right? But in Eber's papyrus, right? His recipe was acacia gum, honey, and dates. That was a vaginal pessary. Okay, so to treat. When fermented, it releases lactic acid, which acts as a spermicide, contraceptive. Okay, it's also associated with fertility rituals, reflecting dual symbolism of life and regulation. Okay, and then spiritual and ritual healing. In biblical purification rituals, acacia, when it was called hyssop, so the little saplings, is sprinkled in blood and water rites for cleansing moral or physical impurity. Because remember, spirituality and science were the same exact thing. They weren't ripped apart. Burning resin in sacred ceremonies was antiseptic for the space and a spiritual cleansing. And then the psychoactive alkaloids gave us our altered consciousness, and we would go on these vision quests, which would also help mental health. There's a lot of research out there that using psychoactive drugs can help with your mental health, but the FDA wants to regulate it and they want to do studies on it. Okay. Modern science confirms gum arabic is a prebiotic, anti-inflammatory, throat soother, great for your teeth and gums. Bark extracts are antimicrobial and wound healing, and resin fumigation is air purification. So no wonder this tree was so important to the ancients for hundreds of thousands, if not a million years, because it could be used for so much. That's why it was called the tree of life. And that's why it was associated with the Great Mother. The earth already had, and it still has everything that we need. It's up to us to be able to use it. All right. I thank you guys for being with me today, especially through the, let me take this down, especially through the tinfoil hat section and the bonus section. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Was Moses high? And if he was high, could he have gotten something wrong? And this entire, two different all three Abrahamic religions are based on what Moses saw when he was high, and also what Noah said when he was drunk. Interesting, huh? All right. So, Wednesday, we're going to continue with the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. We are more than halfway through, and then we're going to get into the book behind me, Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. We're also going to get into another book that was written a long time ago, talking about the 14 and 1500s into the 1600s, about the natives and Aboriginal people of the Americas, from South America to North America. So we're going to talk about that because there's interesting information that we were never taught in school. So Pivot Point Wednesday is going to kind of become a wild book club where we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but it'll still be a Pivot Point Wednesday. Next Sunday, there won't be a show because on Monday, the 25th, we're going to continue with our look at the Khazarian Jews and talking about where the actual Jewish homeland is. And I will have my special guest, Adrian Hicks, with me. So that's on Monday, the 25th. That's going to be a great conversation. I hope you all can make it. So if I don't see you this Wednesday, I hope to see you next Monday. Now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together.